The champagne flute didn't just fall, it was knocked over, sending sticky, golden liquid cascading onto the only pair of frayed jeans in the first-class cabin. Karenna, the chief purser, didn't gasp. She didn't apologize. She simply looked down at the man in seat 1A with a mixture of disgust and triumph, as if the accident were his fault for existing in her workspace. She thought she was disciplining an unruly economy passenger who had snuck up front. She had no idea that the quiet man wiping his knees wasn't just a passenger. He was the man who had signed the checks for the very jet she was standing on. By the time this flight lands, careers will end, egos will shatter, and the hierarchy of the sky will be violently rearranged. This is the story of Flight 404 to Zurich. Rain lashed against the reinforced glass of the departure lounge at JFK Terminal 4. It was a miserable Tuesday evening, the kind of weather that grounded lighter aircraft and put everyone in a sour mood. But inside the exclusive Stratum Airlines lounge, the air was conditioned to a crisp, floral-scented perfection. Eliana Bennett sat in the far corner of the lounge, away from the buffet and the complimentary bar. To the casual observer, Eliana looked like he had taken a wrong turn on his way to the Greyhound station. He wore a charcoal grey hoodie that had seen better days, a pair of vintage denim jeans, and scuffed hiking boots. His backpack, resting by his feet, was made of canvas, not the sleek Tumi or Rimowa polycarbonate rolling behind the other patrons. Eliana was tired. It had been a grueling 48 hours of negotiations in Silicon Valley, followed by a red-eye to New York, and now, finally, the last leg to Zurich for the World Economic Forum. He wasn't there to party. He was there to close a deal on lithium mining rights that would shift the balance of the electric vehicle market for the next decade. He checked his watch, a battered Timex. It was time to board. As he approached the gate for Stratum Airlines Flight 404, the priority lane was already buzzing with the elite. Men in bespoke Italian suits and women dripping in discreet diamonds checked their phones impatiently. Eliana joined the queue. "Excuse me, sir," a voice clipped through the ambient noise. Eliana looked up. A gate agent, whose name tag read Brenda, was leaning over the podium, her eyebrows raised in a perfect arch of skepticism. "The boarding is currently restricted to Group 1. First class and Diamond Medallion members only," Brenda said, her voice loud enough to draw the attention of the man in the pinstripe suit ahead of Eliana. "I know," Eliana said softly. He held out his phone, the QR code for his boarding pass, glowing on the screen. Brenda didn't scan it immediately. She looked at the screen, then back at Eliana's hoodie, then down at his boots. It was a visual frisking. She snatched the scanner and aimed it at the phone with aggressive reluctance. "Beep, green light, seat 1A, Brenda frowned, tapping her terminal. "Wait a moment," she typed furiously. "The system is lagging. It's unusual for upgrades to process this late." "I didn't buy an upgrade," Eliana said, his voice calm, deep, and steady. "I bought the ticket." "Right," Brenda muttered, clearly not believing him. She thrust a printed ticket at him. "Go ahead, but you'll need to gate-check that bag. The overhead bins in first are reserved for standard carry-ons. It fits the dimensions," Eliana countered, "and it contains sensitive documents. Check it or you don't board," she snapped, pointing to the jet bridge. Eliana took a breath. He was too tired to fight a gate agent. He pulled his laptop and a small hard drive from the canvas bag, handed the bag over to a porter, and walked down the jet bridge. He could feel the eyes of the other passengers burning into his back. He stepped onto the aircraft, a Boeing 777-300ER, the flagship of the Stratum fleet. The lighting was mood purple. Soft jazz played over the PA system, and the smell of warmed nuts and expensive leather filled the cabin. Standing at the door was Karenna. Karenna was a legend at Stratum Airlines, but for all the wrong reasons. She was the lead purser, a woman in her late 40s who wore her uniform like armor. Her hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful, and her makeup was applied with surgical precision. She prided herself on keeping her cabin pristine, which, in her mind, meant keeping it free of riffraff. Eliana stepped aboard. "Good evening," he said, nodding to her. Karenna looked at him. She didn't nod. She didn't smile. She looked past him, her eyes locking on to the man in the pinstripe suit behind him. "Welcome back, Mr. Montgomery," she cooed, her voice transforming instantly into honey. "We have your usual scotch ready." Mr. Montgomery brushed past Eliana, bumping his shoulder. "Good to see you, Karenna. Get this guy out of the way, will you?" Karenna's gaze snapped back to Eliana. "Sir, you need to keep moving. Economy is through the second aisle all the way back." "I'm in 1A, Eliana said, stopping. Karenna let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a cruel sound. "Check your ticket again, hun. 1A is a bulkhead suite. You're likely in 41A. Easy mistake." Eliana held up the ticket Brenda had printed. Karenna snatched it. She stared at it. She held it up to the light as if looking for a forgery. Her lips thinned. "Well," she said, handing it back with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated. "It seems the computer has made an error. But if it says 1A, I suppose you can sit there until we sort it out. Do not unpack. I will be checking the manifest with the captain." "Thank you," Eliana said, stepping past her. He found his seat. It was a semi-private suite with sliding doors. He sat down, placing his laptop on the side table. He closed his eyes, exhaling a long, slow breath. He just wanted a water and to sleep for 7 hours. He didn't know that Karenna was already in the galley, picking up the interphone to call the cockpit. "Captain Rogers?" she whispered, her hand cupped over the receiver. "We have a situation in first, a glitch in the booking system. I have a suspicious individual in 1A. He doesn't match the profile. I think he might have hacked a loyalty account or switched tickets." Captain Rogers, a man who had been flying for 30 years and shared Karenna's disdain for anything that disrupted his routine, grunted. "Is he violent?" "No, just out of place. Looks like he slept under a bridge." "Should I remove him?" "Not unless he causes a scene," Rogers replied. "We're already 10 minutes behind slot. Just freeze him out. If the ticket is fake, security will grab him in Zurich. Don't serve him." "Understood," Karenna smiled. She hung up the phone and turned to the junior flight attendant, a young woman named Sarah who was prepping the pre-flight drinks. "Sarah," Karenna commanded, "do not serve 1A, not a drop. If he asks, we are out of stock. If he pushes, get me." "But isn't that illegal?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide. "He has a ticket." Karenna stepped close, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "This is my cabin. You are on probation. Do you want to pass probation, Sarah?" Sarah gulped and nodded. "Then ignore him." The plane pushed back from the gate. The safety demonstration played on the screens, but in first class, nobody watched. They were too busy settling into their cocoons of privilege. Eliana was thirsty. His throat felt like sandpaper. As the plane reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign chimed off, he waited for the service cart. He watched as Karenna moved down the aisle. She was a whirlwind of efficiency for everyone else. "Mr. Montgomery, your Glenfiddich. Neat. 2 ice cubes on the side, just as you like it. Mrs. van der Hoven, let me take that coat for you. Would you like the warm nuts or the canapes first?" She reached row 1. Eliana straightened up. "Excuse me," he said, raising his hand slightly. "Could I get a bottle of water, please?" Karenna didn't turn her head. She floated past his suite as if it were an empty closet. moving directly to seat 2A. Eliana frowned. Maybe she hadn't heard him. The engines on the 737 were powerful, creating a dull roar. He waited for her to return. 5 minutes later, she walked back toward the galley. "Miss," Eliana said, louder this time. Karenna stopped her. She turned slowly, her body rigid. She looked at the space above Eliana's head. "Yes?" "I asked for some water. I'd actually love a sparkling water if you have it." "We are currently prioritizing our Diamond members," Karenna said, her tone flat. "I will get to you when I have time." "I am a paying passenger in first class," Eliana said, his patience beginning to fray at the edges. "I'm the first seat in the cabin. You just served everyone behind me. Sir, raise your voice again, and I will have you restrained," Karenna said. The threat was so sudden, so disproportionate, that Eliana blinked. "I'm not raising my voice. I'm asking for water." "And I told you to wait," she snapped, turning on her heel and vanishing behind the galley curtain. Eliana sat back, stunned. He had faced discrimination before, in boardrooms, at banks, in high-end real estate offices. But this overt hostility at 35,000 feet was brazen. Across the aisle, Mr. Montgomery chuckled. He swirled his scotch, looking at Eliana with amusement. "She's got your number, doesn't she? Maybe you should have stuck to the back of the bus, pal. First class is about pedigree." Eliana looked at Montgomery. "Pedigree," Eliana repeated calmly. "Is that what you call it?" "I call it knowing where you belong," Montgomery sneered. "You think wearing a hoodie makes you Mark Zuckerberg. You look like a drug dealer who got lucky at the casino." Eliana turned away. He opened his laptop. He needed to document this. He wasn't going to make a scene. That's what they wanted. They wanted the angry black man narrative. They wanted him to shout so they could justify the handcuffs. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, he connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi. It was slow, costing $25 for the flight, but it was functional. He logged into his secure server. He pulled up the corporate structure of Stratum Airlines. Stratum was a public company, but it was struggling. Its stock had dipped 14% in the last quarter due to rising fuel costs and union disputes. They were currently in talks for a massive capital injection from a private equity firm to upgrade their aging fleet. Eliana navigated to the investor relations page. He looked at the list of major shareholders: Vanguard Group, BlackRock, State Street, Aurora Capital Holdings. Eliana paused. Aurora Capital Holdings. He opened a new tab and logged into his personal portfolio dashboard. The screen populated with numbers that would make Mr. Montgomery choke on his scotch. Eliana Bennett was the founder and majority stakeholder of Aurora Capital Holdings. He didn't just have shares in Stratum Airlines. Through a leveraged buyout that had been finalized only 3 days ago, news that hadn't hit the public wire yet, Aurora Capital had acquired a controlling 51% interest in Stratum's leasing division. Essentially, Eliana owned the planes. Stratum just flew them. He looked at the serial number of the aircraft on the safety card, N909SA. He typed the tail number into his asset database. Owner, Aurora Aviation Leasing. Lessee, Stratum Airlines. Lease status, active. Review pending. A slow, cold smile spread across Eliana's face. He wasn't just a passenger. He was the landlord. And his tenants were being very, very rude. He pressed the call button. In the galley, Karenna groaned. "He's pressing the button again." Sarah looked nervous. "Karenna, just give him the water. He's been quiet." "No," Karenna said, grabbing a bottle of cheap, lukewarm water from the economy cart supply, not the crystal-bottled Evian, reserved for first. "He wants attention. I'll give him attention." She marched out to seat 1A. She didn't hand him the bottle. She dropped it on his tray table with a heavy thud. "There," she said. "Thank you," Eliana said. "I also need to speak to the captain." Karenna laughed. "The captain is flying the plane. He doesn't have time for complaints about the water service." "It's not a complaint," Eliana said, his eyes locking onto hers. They were dark, intelligent, and suddenly terrifyingly intense. "It's a business matter regarding the ownership of this aircraft." "You must be high," Karenna scoffed. "If you press that button one more time, I will have the captain authorize a restraint order. You will spend the next 6 hours zip-tied to your seat. Do you understand?" "I understand perfectly," Eliana said. "You've made your position very clear, Karenna. Now, I'm going to make mine clear." He turned back to his laptop. Karenna rolled her eyes and walked away. "Unbelievable," she muttered to Montgomery, who was watching the show. "They let anyone on these days." "Disgraceful," Montgomery agreed. Eliana put on his noise-cancelling headphones. He wasn't watching a movie. He was opening a VoIP application. He was going to make a phone call. It was 2 a.m. in London, but the man he was about to call never slept. Eliana dialed a private number. "Preston Holloway," a groggy but sharp voice answered after 2 rings. Preston Holloway was the CEO of Stratum Airlines. "Preston," Eliana said, his voice low. "It's Eliana Bennett." There was a pause on the line, then the sound of rustling sheets and a lamp clicking on. The tone on the other end shifted from annoyance to immediate, high-alert deference. "Eliana, good God, is everything all right? We weren't expecting to hear from you until the acquisition press conference on Friday." "We have a problem, Preston," Eliana said, looking at Karenna, who was currently laughing with Montgomery while pointing at Eliana. "I'm currently on flight 404 to Zurich. I'm sitting in seat 1A. "You're flying commercial. Why didn't you take the corporate jet? We would have... I like to see the product I'm buying, Preston. I like to see how the crew treats the customers. It's illuminating." Preston Holloway went silent. He knew that tone. It was the tone Eliana used right before he gutted a company's board of directors. "Eliana, what happened?" "I've been denied service. I've been threatened with physical restraint. I've been racially profiled by your chief purser, a woman named Karenna, and encouraged by a passenger she seems to favor. And apparently, my ticket is suspected of being fraudulent because I don't fit the profile." "Jesus Christ," Preston breathed. "Eliana, I am so sorry. I will call the operations center immediately. I'll have them—" "No," Eliana cut him off. "I don't want you to call operations. I want you to call the cockpit. Right now." "The cockpit?" "Eliana, they're over the Atlantic. I know where they are, Preston. I own the plane. Call the cockpit via SATCOM. Tell Captain Rogers that the owner of the aircraft is in seat 1A, and he is currently being treated like a criminal. And Preston?" "Yes." "Tell him that if I am not treated with the respect due to a human being, not a billionaire, just a human being, within the next 5 minutes, I am pulling the lease on the entire 727 fleet. Stratum will be flying Cessnas by Monday." "I'm dialing now," Preston said, his voice trembling. Eliana hung up. He took a sip of the warm water. He watched the galley curtain. He counted down. 5, 4, 3. Suddenly, the chime for the cockpit interphone rang through the cabin. It was a distinctive, urgent triple chime. Karenna frowned. That was the emergency line. She dropped the magazine she was reading and rushed to the phone. Eliana watched her pick it up. He saw the color drain from her face. It started at her neck and moved up, leaving her pale beneath the heavy makeup. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked toward seat 1A, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrific realization. She dropped the phone. It dangled by its cord, swinging back and forth, hitting the wall with a dull thud, thud, thud. The game had just changed. Inside the cockpit of Flight 404, the atmosphere had shifted from routine boredom to suffocating tension. Captain Rogers stared at the SATCOM handset as if it were a venomous snake he had just been forced to kiss. The line was dead, but Preston Halloway's screaming voice still echoed in his ears. "If he isn't satisfied in 5 minutes, Rogers, don't bother filing a flight plan for Monday. You'll be flying cargo to Antarctica." Rogers turned to his first officer, a younger man named Davis. Davis was looking at him with wide, concerned eyes. "Who was that?" Davis asked. "Operations?" "The CEO," Rogers rasped. He undid his seatbelt. "Take the controls. I have to go back there." "Is there a security threat?" "Worse," Rogers said, grabbing his hat. "We have an owner on board, and apparently Karenna has been treating him like a stowaway." Rogers opened the reinforced cockpit door and stepped into the galley. The contrast was jarring. The cabin was quiet, smelling of lavender and warmed bread. Karenna was standing by the convection oven, her hand still trembling as she stared at the interphone she had dropped. When she saw the captain, she rushed forward, her face a mask of panic. "Captain, the phone! I don't know who—" "Shut up," Rogers said. It wasn't a shout, but the sheer coldness of it silenced her instantly. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. He saw the heavy makeup, the disdain etched into her frown lines, the arrogance that had gone unchecked for too long. "You told me he was a suspicious individual. You told me he didn't fit the profile." He didn't," Karenna stammered, glancing toward the curtain separating them from the passengers. "He's wearing a hoodie. He has a canvas bag. He looks like Eliana Bennett," Rogers hissed. "The man who just bought the leasing rights to this entire fleet. He pays your salary, Karenna. He pays my salary, and you just refused him water." Karenna's knees actually buckled. She grabbed the counter for support. I didn't know." "Ignorance is not a defense for incompetence," Rogers said, adjusting his tie. "Get out of my way." He brushed past her and stepped into the first-class cabin. The passengers were settling in. Mr. Montgomery was halfway through his scotch, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as the captain appeared, expecting a friendly greeting. Rogers ignored him. Rogers walked straight to seat 1A. Eliana was typing on his laptop. He didn't look up as the captain approached. He let the man stand there for a solid 10 seconds, an eternity in a service interaction. "Mr. Bennett," Rogers said, his voice tight. Eliana stopped typing. He slowly removed his noise-cancelling headphones and turned his chair. His expression was unreadable. "Captain Rogers, I assume you received a call." "I did, sir," Rogers said. He felt sweat prickling under his hat. "I want to personally apologize for the misunderstanding regarding your seating and service. There was a failure in communication regarding the manifest." "It wasn't a communication failure, Captain," Eliana said calmly. "The manifest was clear. My ticket was clear. Your chief purser chose to overrule the system based on her personal bias, and you authorized her to freeze me out based on her description of my clothing. Is that correct?" Rogers swallowed hard. "Sir, we prioritize safety. When a crew member flags a concern, is a request for water a safety concern?" Eliana asked. "Is a request for the seat I paid for a threat?" "No, sir." "Then don't hide behind safety protocols to excuse prejudice," Eliana said. He gestured to the empty table in front of him. "I still don't have that water." "I will get it for you personally," Rogers said. He turned to the galley, snapping his fingers at Sarah, who was peeking through the curtain. "Sarah, Evian, ice, lemon. Now." Sarah scrambled to comply. "And Mr. Bennett," Rogers added, lowering his voice. "I can assure you there will be a full report filed regarding this incident upon landing." "Oh, I know," Eliana said, finally cracking a small, dry smile. "I'll be the one writing it. Now please, return to the cockpit. I'd prefer my pilots to be flying the plane, not serving drinks. That's what the cabin crew is supposed to be for." Rogers nodded stiffly and retreated. As he passed Karenna in the galley, he didn't even look at her. "Fix this," he whispered, "or you're done." Karenna stood there, the blood rushing in her ears. She looked at the bottle of expensive champagne in the chiller, the Dom Perignon, 2008. She grabbed it. Her hands were shaking so badly the glass clinked against the counter. She had to fix this. She had charmed difficult passengers before. She could charm him. He was just a man after all, a rich man. They all had egos. She just had to stroke it. She composed her face into a desperate parody of her usual professional smile, grabbed a crystal flute, and headed for Seat 1A. Karenna approached Seat 1A as if she were walking onto a stage. She held the bottle of Dom Perignon like a peace offering, the condensation cold against her sweating palm. "Mr. Bennet," she purred, her voice trembling slightly but pitching for warmth. "I am so terribly sorry for the confusion earlier. We've been having terrible system glitches all week. Please allow me to offer you a glass of our vintage champagne. It's the 2008, a truly spectacular year." She reached out to pour, but Eliana's hand moved faster. He placed his palm flat over the top of the crystal flute. "No," he said. Karenna froze. "Sir, I don't drink while I'm working," Eliana said. "And right now, I'm working." "Working?" Karenna blinked, her smile faltering. "I'm auditing my investment," Eliana said. He closed his laptop and stood up. Eliana was a tall man, well over 6 feet. When he stood up in the confined space of the cabin, he loomed over Karenna. The frayed hoodie no longer looked like poverty. It looked like the eccentricity of a man who had transcended the need to impress anyone. "You mentioned system glitches," Eliana said, stepping into the aisle. "Let's test that theory. Show me the manifest." The manifest is on the tablet, sir. It's confidential. I own the tablet, Karenna. Hand it over." She hesitated. Eliana just held out his hand. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Across the aisle, Mr. Montgomery was watching with his mouth slightly open, his scotch forgotten. Reluctantly, Karenna unlocked her crew iPad and handed it to him. Eliana scrolled through it with the speed of a man who built software for a living. "Here I am. Seat 1A, Eliana Bennet. Status, VIP owner. It's flagged in red, right next to my name." He turned the screen to her. "That's a very bright red, Karenna. Hard to miss. Did the system glitch, or did your eyes?" I must have scrolled past it too quickly. Carelessness, Eliana noted. "Strike one." He handed the tablet back and walked toward the galley. "Sarah, is it?" he asked the junior flight attendant who was cowering by the coffee machine. "Yes, sir," Sarah squeaked. "Sarah, what is the standard protocol for a first-class welcome?" Sarah stammered, looking at Karenna for help, but Karenna was staring at the floor. "Hang coats, offer a pre-departure beverage, provide the menu, and offer a hot towel." "Excellent," Eliana said. "And how many of those steps were performed for seat 1A?" "None, sir." "And why was that?" Sarah's eyes watered. Because Karenna told me not to." "Sarah," Karenna hissed. "She threatened my probation," Sarah blurted out, the dam breaking. "She said if I served you, she'd fail my review." Eliana turned slowly to Karenna. "Intimidation of junior staff, creating a hostile work environment, ordering a subordinate to violate service standards." He ticked them off on his fingers. "That strikes 2, 3, and 4. "Now look here," a voice boomed from seat 2A. Mr. Montgomery had had enough. He stood up, his face flushed with whiskey and indignation. He was a man used to being the most important person in the room, and he didn't like the attention shifting to the guy in the hoodie. "I don't know who you think you are," Montgomery said, pointing a finger at Eliana, "but you're ruining the flight. So you own some shares. Bully for you. Karenna has been taking care of me on this flight for 10 years. She's the best in the business. You're just looking for a reason to complain because you have a chip on your shoulder." Eliana turned to Montgomery. The cabin went deadly silent. "Mr. Montgomery," Eliana said, his voice dropping an octave, smooth and dangerous, "I don't have a chip on my shoulder. I have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that Stratum Airlines doesn't go bankrupt. What does that have to do with you harassing the stewardess?" "Everything," Eliana said. He took a step toward Montgomery. "You see, Stratum is losing money. Specifically, they are losing high-value corporate contracts. I spent the last 3 days analyzing the data. Do you know why?" Montgomery stayed silent. "Customer retention," Eliana answered himself. "Stratum has a 40% churn rate in first class. People fly us once, get treated poorly, and then they go to Emirates or Singapore Airlines. And when I looked at the complaints, do you know what the #1 recurring keyword was?" Eliana looked at Karenna. "Attitude." He turned back to Montgomery. "You like Karenna because she fawns over you. She treats you like a king. But to do that, she treats everyone she deems lesser like garbage. That might make you feel special, Mr. Montgomery, but it costs my company millions in lost revenue. Every time she sneers at a passenger who doesn't fit the profile, she burns a bridge." Eliana gestured to his own clothes. "I walked on here looking like a nobody, and because of that, she was willing to let me sit thirsty and humiliated. What if I was a tech CEO in a hoodie? What if I was a music producer? What if I was just a tired father who saved up for a nice seat? She gambled the company's reputation on her ability to judge a book by its cover." Eliana leaned in close to Montgomery. "She bet wrong. And now I'm cashing in the chips." Montgomery slumped back into his seat, defeated by the logic. He mumbled something and looked out the window. Eliana turned back to the galley. He wasn't done. "Karenna, open the service cart," he ordered. "Sir, open it. I want to see the inventory." With trembling hands, she unlatched the metal door of the cart. Eliana inspected the rows of alcohol and mixers. He pulled out a bottle of red wine. It was open. He checked the label. It was a corked bottle, half empty. "Why is this open?" It's from the inbound flight," Karenna lied. "Liar," Eliana said softly. "The seal date is today. You opened this pre-flight. Did you have a drink, Karenna?" "No, absolutely not." "Then maybe you gave a glass to Mr. Montgomery before we took off, even though regulations state no alcohol service during refueling." Karenna went pale. That was a Federal Aviation Administration violation, a big one. He insisted. "Strike 5, Eliana said. "And that's the one that costs you your license." He turned to Sarah. "Sarah, you are now the lead purser for this flight." "Me?" Sarah gasped. "But I'm not qualified. I haven't done the training." "You know how to be polite. You know how to pour water. You know how not to break federal law." "Yes, sir." "Then you are more qualified than she is," Eliana said. He pointed to the jump seat, the small, uncomfortable fold-down chair near the door where the crew sat during takeoff and landing. "Karenna," Eliana said, his voice finalizing the command. "You are relieved of duty. You will sit in the jump seat for the remainder of this flight. You will not speak to passengers. You will not touch the food or drink. You are dead weight until we get to Zurich." "You can't do that," Karenna whispered, tears finally spilling over, cutting tracks through her foundation. "This is my flight." "Not anymore," Eliana said. "Now it's my plane. Sit down." Karenna looked at Montgomery, begging for help. He refused to meet her eyes. She looked at Sarah, who looked away. Slowly, painfully, Karenna walked to the jump seat, pulled down the strap, and buckled herself in. She looked small, defeated, and utterly humiliated. Eliana watched her for a moment, ensuring she stayed put. Then he turned to Sarah. "Now," Eliana said, his voice returning to a gentle, tired baritone, "I believe I asked for a sparkling water." The flight over the Atlantic was smooth, but the atmosphere inside the first-class cabin was volatile enough to shatter glass. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, thick with unspoken threats and simmering resentment. Karenna sat in the forward jump seat, strapped in like a prisoner being transferred to a supermax facility. She wasn't looking at the passengers anymore. She was staring at the galley wall, her mind racing. She was mentally drafting her report to the Union. She would claim Eliana was aggressive, that he hijacked the cabin, that Captain Rogers was coerced. She convinced herself that once they hit the ground in Zurich, the real hierarchy would be restored. Money could buy a ticket, she reasoned, but it couldn't rewrite the Union contract. She just had to wait him out. Meanwhile, Sarah was drowning. Without the lead purser to manage the flow, and with the sudden, terrifying pressure of serving the man who owned the plane, Sarah was fumbling. She was trying to plate the dinner service, a complex choreography of china, silverware, and multiple courses, all by herself. A crash echoed from the galley. Mr. Montgomery, who had been sulking over his iPad, let out a loud, theatrical sigh. "Oh, for heaven's sake! It's amateur hour up there. This is what happens when you dismantle the chain of command." He looked pointedly at Eliana. Eliana ignored him. He unbuckled his seatbelt and walked into the galley. Sarah was on her knees, frantically picking up porcelain shards. She had dropped a salad plate. Vinaigrette was splattered across the pristine floor mats. She was crying, silent, shaking sobs that racked her small frame. I'm sorry," she whispered, as Eliana appeared. "Please don't fire me. I'll pay for the plate. I'll clean it up." Eliana knelt down beside her. He didn't shout. He didn't scold. He picked up a large shard of china. "Sarah, stop," he said gently. "I can't do this," she hyperventilated. "Karenna always handles the plating. I just do the drinks and the bread. I'm not ready for lead." "You're right," Eliana said. "You're not ready because nobody trained you. They kept you small so they could feel big." He handed her a napkin. "Stand up." They stood. Eliana grabbed a roll of paper towels. "I used to work as a line cook in Chicago to pay for my first semester of college," Eliana said, wiping a spot of dressing off the counter. "I know how to plate a meal. Show me the diagram." Sarah blinked, sniffing. The plating guide?" "Yes. Stick it on the wall. You handle the oven rotation. I'll handle the presentation. We're going to serve dinner." "But, sir, you're the owner. You can't—" "I'm hungry, Sarah. And so are the other passengers. And since our lead purser is currently in time out," he glanced at Karenna, who was pretending not to listen, "we improvise." For the next hour, a surreal scene unfolded at 38,000 feet. The billionaire investor stood in the galley of his own jet, sleeves rolled up, carefully arranging truffle-infused asparagus and searing fillets with a culinary torch. He moved with the same efficiency he applied to hostile takeovers. When Sarah brought the meal to Mr. Montgomery, the man looked at the plate. It was perfect, better actually, than Karena's usual rushed service. "Who plated this?" Montgomery asked suspiciously. "Mr. Bennet did, sir," Sarah said, a hint of newfound pride in her voice. Montgomery looked over his shoulder. Eliana was in the galley, wiping down the counter. Montgomery stabbed a piece of steak, chewed it, and swallowed. He wanted to hate it. He wanted it to be cold or overcooked, but it was delicious. "Humph," Montgomery grunted. "Well, at least he's useful for something." Back in the galley, the work was done. Eliana washed his hands and dried them. He turned to Sarah. "How long have you worked for Stratum, Sarah?" 2 years, sir." "And what is your salary?" Sarah hesitated. 24,000 a year, plus per diem." Eliana's brow furrowed. 24? In this economy? How do you live in New York on that?" "I have 2 roommates in Queens," she admitted, "and I drive Uber on my days off." Eliana shook his head slowly. He looked at Karena, sitting in the jump seat. Karena was a senior purser. She was likely making 6 figures due to legacy contracts, yet she treated the person making poverty wages like a servant. "That changes," Eliana said, more to himself than to Sarah. "That changes on Monday." He went back to his seat. The cabin lights dimmed for the night portion of the flight. As Eliana reclined his seat into a bed, he saw a movement. Karena had unbuckled. She was creeping toward the cockpit. "Sit down, Karena," Eliana said without opening his eyes. "I need to use the lavatory," she spat back. "Use the one in economy," Eliana said. "The first-class lavatory is for working crew and passengers. You are neither right now." Karena gasped. "You want me to walk through the entire plane? In my uniform?" "It's a long walk," Eliana agreed. "Maybe on the way, you can look at the faces of the people who actually pay your salary, the teachers, the students, the families, the people you usually sneer at." Karena stood there, vibrating with rage, but she didn't dare defy him. Not now. She turned and marched through the curtain, heading back into the darkness of the economy cabin. Eliana opened one eye and watched her go. He pulled his phone out. He had a connection again. He sent one text message to his legal counsel in Zurich. "Prepare the papers. We're landing in 3 hours." The descent into Zurich was grey and turbulent. The Alps were hidden behind a thick blanket of fog, mirroring the mood on Flight 404. As the fasten seatbelt sign chimed, Karena returned to her jump seat. She looked disheveled. The walk to the back of the plane had been humiliating. Passengers had asked her for drinks, for blankets, and she had to tell them she wasn't working. The confusion and annoyance on their faces had stung her pride. But as the wheels touched the tarmac with a screech of rubber, her confidence began to return. "We're on the ground now," she thought. "Swiss soil, union rules. He can't touch me here." She smoothed her skirt. She checked her makeup in a compact mirror. She was ready to spin the narrative. She would be the victim of an unruly, power-tripping passenger. The plane taxied to the gate. The engines whined down. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Rogers's voice came over the PA. It sounded strained. "Welcome to Zurich. Please remain seated until the aircraft comes to a complete stop. For those in first class, we ask for your patience, as we have special ground protocol today." Mr. Montgomery looked at Eliana. "Special protocol? Is that for you? Did you call the paparazzi?" Eliana was packing his laptop calmly. "Something like that." The jet bridge connected with a heavy thud. The cabin door opened. Usually the gate agent would step in, smile, and the passengers would leave. Not today. 2 men in dark suits stepped onto the plane. They were not airline staff. They wore earpieces and carried leather portfolios. Behind them was a woman with severe glasses and a clipboard. Karena unbuckled immediately and stood up. She flashed her brightest, most professional smile. "Officers," she said, assuming they were immigration or security. "Thank goodness you're here. I need to file a formal complaint against the passenger in 1A. He has interfered with flight crew duties and—" The lead suit held up a hand. He didn't even look at her. He looked past her to Eliana. "Mr. Bennett," the man said, his accent heavy Swiss German. "Welcome to Zurich. I am Hans Weber, legal counsel for Aurora Capital Europe." "Hans," Eliana said, nodding. "Good to see you. Did you bring the documents?" "We have the cease and desist orders and the suspension notices prepared," Hans said. Karena's smile froze. "Suspension?" Hans finally turned to her. He didn't look impressed. He reached into his portfolio and pulled out a thick, creamy white envelope with the Stratum Airlines logo embossed on it. "Ms. Karena Miller?" Hans asked. "Yes?" "You are hereby served with an immediate suspension of flight duties, pending an internal investigation into gross misconduct, violation of FAA regulations regarding alcohol consumption, and discriminatory practices." "What?" Karena shrieked. "You can't do this. I have a union rep." "Your union representative has already been contacted," the woman with the clipboard said, stepping forward. "She has been sent the audio logs from the cockpit voice recorder, which Captain Rogers authorized us to access remotely. Specifically, the part where you admitted to serving alcohol to a passenger during a critical phase of flight, and your refusal to serve a ticketed passenger based on profiling." The woman looked at Karena over her glasses. The union declined to contest the suspension. "They don't defend federal violations, Ms. Miller." Karena felt the floor drop out from under her. But Mr. Montgomery demanded the drink." She pointed a shaking finger at Montgomery. "He made me do it." Mr. Montgomery, who was trying to sneak past the group to get off the plane, stopped. He looked at Eliana, then at the lawyers, then at Karena. "I never asked for anything," Montgomery lied smoothly, adjusting his tie. She insisted. "I actually found her service quite pushy." "You snake!" Karena screamed, lunging toward him. The second security officer stepped in, blocking her path with a solid wall of muscle. "Ms. Miller," Hans said, his voice ice-cold, "you will surrender your crew ID and your badge. Now." "No," she whispered. "This is my life. I've flown for 20 years. "And you spent 20 years thinking you were above the people you served," Eliana said, stepping into the aisle. He stood next to the lawyers. "You forgot the golden rule of hospitality, Karena. You never know who you're talking to." Eliana held out his hand. Trembling, sobbing, Karena unpinned her wings, the silver wings she had polished every morning. She unclipped her ID badge. She dropped them into Eliana's hand. "Escort her off the premises," Eliana told the security team. "She is not to re-enter any Stratum aircraft or facility." "This isn't fair," Karena wailed as the security guards took her by the arms. They didn't drag her, but they guided her firmly. She was led out of the aircraft, not as the queen of the cabin, but as a liability being removed from the premises. As she passed the economy cabin, the curtain was pulled back. A few passengers who had seen her walk of shame to the bathroom earlier were watching. They didn't know the full story, but seeing the haughty purser being escorted off by security told them enough. Someone in row 12 started a slow clap. It didn't catch on, but the humiliation hung in the air. First class was now empty, save for Eliana, Sarah, Captain Rogers, who had emerged from the cockpit, and the legal team. Captain Rogers looked at Eliana. "Sir, about my role in this." "You failed to lead, Rogers," Eliana said. "You let her run your ship. You're on probation. You'll be undergoing retraining on command authority and bias intervention. If you fail, you're out. If you pass, you keep your wings. Understood?" "Understood, sir," Rogers said, looking relieved he wasn't fired on the spot. Eliana turned to Sarah. She was standing by the door, clutching her bag, looking terrified. "Sarah," Eliana said. "Yes, Mr. Bennett. I'll go home now." "Not yet," Eliana said. He turned to the woman with the clipboard. "Is the ground transport ready?" "The limousine is waiting, sir." "Good. Sarah, you're coming with us." "Me?" Sarah's eyes went wide. "Am I in trouble?" "No," Eliana smiled. "But you are the acting lead purser of the flagship aircraft, and I have a meeting with the board of directors in 1 hour to discuss the future of this airline. I need someone there who actually knows what it's like to work the aisle." He gestured to the door. "After you." Sarah looked at the captain, who nodded encouragingly. She straightened her uniform, took a deep breath, and walked out the door ahead of the billionaire. But the story wasn't over. As they walked up the jet bridge, Eliana saw Mr. Montgomery waiting at the gate area. He was on his phone, looking agitated. When he saw Eliana, he hung up and forced a smile. "Mr. Bennett," Montgomery called out, waving a hand. "Quite a show back there. Look, I wanted to apologize for the misunderstanding. I didn't realize who you were. My firm, Montgomery Holdings, we actually do a lot of logistics work. Maybe we could grab a coffee? Discuss synergies?" Eliana stopped. He looked at Montgomery, the man who had laughed when he was denied water, the man who had called him a drug dealer. Eliana reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times. "Mr. Montgomery," Eliana said, "I just checked our vendor list. Montgomery Holdings provides the catering logistics for Stratum, don't they?" Montgomery's smile faltered. "Yes, we have the exclusive contract." "Not anymore," Eliana said. "I'm terminating it, effective immediately." You can't do that. We have a 5-year agreement." "Read the fine print," Eliana said, walking past him. "There's a clause for reputational damage. Associating with you, that's damaging to my brand." Eliana didn't look back. He walked toward the exit, flanked by his lawyers and a bewildered flight attendant, leaving Montgomery standing alone at the gate, realizing that his scotch on the plane was the most expensive drink he had ever had. The headquarters of Stratum Airlines in Zurich was a fortress of glass and steel, overlooking the grey waters of the lake. In the executive boardroom on the top floor, 12 men and women sat around a mahogany table that cost more than a mid-sized sedan. They were the board of directors, and they were nervous. They had heard the rumors. The acquisition was happening. But they hadn't heard about the incident on Flight 404 yet. The double doors swung open. Eliana Bennett walked in. He had changed out of his hoodie into a sharp, tailored navy suit, but he still wore the scuffed hiking boots, a subtle reminder that he walked his own path. Behind him wasn't a team of bankers. It was Sora. She was still in her flight attendant uniform, clutching a notepad, looking like a deer caught in the headlights of a dozen luxury cars. "Gentlemen, ladies," Eliana said, taking the seat at the head of the table. "This is Sarah. She's going to sit right here, next to me." "Mr. Bennett," the chairman sputtered, "this is a closed session. Staff are not permitted. I own 51% of the leasing rights as of this morning," Eliana cut in. "I can bring my grandmother if I want to. Sarah stays." Eliana placed a single sheet of paper on the table. It was a printout of the passenger manifest from Flight 404, with red ink circling his name. "Today I flew your flagship product," Eliana began, his voice echoing in the silent room, "and I found it rotting." He recounted the story, the refusal of service, the profiling, the arrogance of the chief purser, the cowardice of the captain, the complicity of their top vendor, Montgomery. The board members shifted uncomfortably. They looked at their phones, avoiding eye contact. "You built a culture of elitism," Eliana continued. "You trained your staff to worship the suit and spit on the hoodie, and in doing so, you forgot that money doesn't always wear a tie." He turned to Sarah. "Sarah, tell them what you told me in the galley. Tell them your salary." Sarah stood up, her legs shaking. I make $24,000 a year, sir." A gasp went around the room. One board member adjusted his Rolex, suddenly looking guilty. "24,000, Eliana repeated. "While Karenna, the woman who violated federal law and insulted your new owner, was making 6 figures and terrorizing her team. You reward bullies, and you starve the workers who actually do the job." Eliana leaned forward. "That ends today." He slid a folder across the table. "This is the new operating agreement. Point 1. A 30% wage increase for all cabin crew and ground staff, effective immediately. Point 2. A zero-tolerance policy for passenger profiling. Point 3. A complete audit of the service protocols." "But Mr. Bennett," the CFO protested, "the cost, the margins." "You just saved $10 million by cancelling the Montgomery Holdings contract," Eliana said coldly. "Use that. If you don't like it, I can pull my planes. You can explain to the shareholders why Stratum has no fleet on Monday morning." The room went silent. The CFO nodded slowly. "Understood, sir." 3 months later, the rain had cleared at JFK. Sarah walked through Terminal 4. She wasn't wearing the drab, ill-fitting uniform of a junior attendant anymore. She wore the gold pin of a senior purser. She walked with her head high, smiling at passengers, helping a confused tourist with the kiosk. She wasn't afraid anymore. She loved her job because the job finally loved her back. She passed the food court on her way to the gate. Behind the counter of a fast food burger chain, a woman was wiping down trays. She looked tired. Her hair was frizzy, escaping a paper hat. Her makeup was gone, revealing the deep lines of bitterness etched into her face. It was Karenna. After the incident on 404, as it was now known in the industry, Karenna had been blacklisted. No reputable airline would touch her. She had lost her seniority, her pension, and her status. Now she served fries to the very people she used to look down on. Sarah stopped. She looked at Karenna. Karenna looked up. Their eyes met. For a moment, Karenna's face twisted in recognition, then shame. She looked down at her greasy rag and scrubbed the table harder. Sarah didn't say anything. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The universe had balanced the scales. Sarah turned and walked toward the gate where Flight 404 was boarding. Eliana Bennett was flying out today, heading to Tokyo. He was in seat 1A. But this time, when he walked on board, the entire crew knew exactly who he was. Not because he was a billionaire, but because he was the man who had seen them. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Bennett," Sarah said, handing him a sparkling water with lime before he even sat down. Eliana smiled, taking the glass. "Thank you, Sarah. Good to be back." The engines roared to life, lifting them into the sky, leaving the rain and the old ways far below. And that is the story of how one man's quiet dignity brought down an entire empire of arrogance. It's a powerful reminder that true class isn't about what you wear, what you drink, or where you sit on a plane. True class is about how you treat people when you think no one is watching. Karenna learned that lesson the hard way, losing everything because she judged a book by its cover. Eliana Bennett proved that the most powerful person in the room is often the one who speaks the least. What would you have done if you were in Sarah's shoes? Would you have stood up to Karenna earlier? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. We have a crazy tale coming up next week about a landlord who tries to evict a tenant, only to find out the tenant owns the bank holding his mortgage. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and stay humble.